We're opening a special board meeting of the Vallecitos Water District with the telephone ringing Thursday, June
not here.
13th at 5 o'clock. Pledge of Allegiance. Can we have the Pledge of Allegiance, please? By Christopher Robbins.
Okay, and what did we say as a kid? Eyes on the flag, hand on your heart, ready to begin. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much for bringing me back to my childhood. So many, many years ago. All right. Roll call, please.
Director Ellithorpe?
Here.
Director Evans? Here. Director Hernandez?
Here.
Director Snella?
Here.
Director Martin?
Present.
Thank you.
Well, that was easy. Okay, need a motion to adopt the agenda for the special meeting?
Move to approve.
Motion
Second.
and a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous? Public comment. I don't know, do we have any public comment?
Oh,
At this moment,
well, one's coming. A little slow in the
Well,
uptake.
come along. Don't hold the proceedings. We all have night jobs. Well, the board members have night jobs.
Holding down the couch in front of the TV is not a job.
You gotta turn that in to Diane.
Mike Hunsaker, President of San Marcos.
Do you have it written? Did you write it?
The first one.
And you gotta push the button on the lower right, like, oh, you're on.
He's up.
it's on. It's on. Go ahead, you're on.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. I am hopeful that the 38 acres you are selling will be used to the ratepayers' best benefit. I just attended a meeting where the Port of San Diego was mentioning how it was handling its land use and its leasing land. And it's getting and charging 11% of the revenue for the lease. And here in San Marcos, we have the Creekside Market. And the city gets about 7% of revenue above the rental. If we use high-density development, this can be a major revenue source and a return to the ratepayers on this property. We're looking at densities which more and more look like they're going to be more than 100 apartments per acre, which has already been done in San Marcos as it is. And the rents are not appreciably going down. And the expectation is that we're probably looking at around $2,500 per month per acre, which with say a 10% revenue pull is about $250 per apartment times 100, that's about $25,000 a month. I trust that we are not going to be giving this away at some phenomenally low price, and that we will consider the ratepayers' best interest in this. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the consent calendar. Notice to the public, they know it. A consent calendar. All items will be approved on one motion. I need a motion.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. Action item. Approval of the FY 1920 budget.
All right, I'll
19/20.
I'll jump in and I'll be turning it over to Mr. Owen there. So the item before the board is the presentation of the proposed fiscal year 1920 budget. The revised draft budget was sent to the board on Friday, June 7th, so you should all have a copy of it for a while. Wes will be leading the discussion today, but we also have our district engineer and our operations manager here if there's any specific questions about information in the budget. It's been reviewed extensively at the Finance Committee. President Martin and Director Sinella are on that committee. 6 meetings were dedicated to the budget preparation. And as we discussed at the workshop back on May 29th, input from the Finance Committee has been incorporated into the proposed budget. We held the budget workshop on the 29th where the draft budget was presented. At that meeting, the board did ask several questions, and tonight we're going to try to be addressing the questions that were raised there, as well as presenting the information that was presented at the workshop. Just a reminder, the same reminder I gave at the workshop, you're going to be hearing some numbers that are kind of more forecast, 5-year forecast information. We're not asking you to approve any 5-year forecast information. Those were just used for planning purposes. You're going to be asked to approve tonight a 1-year budget for fiscal year 19-20. So we do include information like water sales, rate increases, capital facility fee increases, power costs, future debt issuance, and things like that. But again, those are just for planning purposes and aren't part of the budget tonight. The board will be asked to take separate actions on any rate increases and any capital facility fee increases at subsequent meetings. None of that is on the docket for tonight. The budget information does include payments required by PERS for the Vallecitos employees, as well as accelerated payments being made by Encina Wastewater Authority, of which Vallecitos has a share. And as a reminder, Encina Wastewater Authority did elect to pay off its PERS obligation in 3 years. The proposed budget also includes an amount called the accelerated payment that will be made to PERS for the Vallecitos employees in accordance with the discussion that took place at the workshop on May 29th. We are proposing one new position in the budget, and that will focus on the district's aging infrastructure and ensure we're doing the right things to the right pieces of hardware to ensure the lowest life cycle costs to prevent rate increases or minimize rate increases in the future. And as I said at the workshop, our finances are in really good shape. We're meeting all of our PERS and debt obligations. We're fully funding all of our required operations. All of our facilities are being either repaired or replaced or built as needed. Our reserves are healthy, and our credit rating remains strong at a AA+ rating. So that's great. So with that, unless there's any specific questions now, I'm going to turn it over to Wes, but feel free to chime in at any point in time and ask any questions. So Wes?
Good evening, President Martin, members of the board. It's my pleasure to present the fiscal year 2019-2020 budget. This may be the last time we get to see this, because hopefully next year I'll be creative enough to change it, so I figured I'd show it one more time. So we're going to take you on that journey down Savings Avenue and Budget Street one last time, and hopefully I can come up with something new for next year. So this presentation is going to be very similar to what you heard in the workshop. We did incorporate hopefully all of your requests into this, so that'll be new material, but otherwise it's pretty much going to be a recap of what you heard on the 29th. So tonight I'm going to talk about the budget process and calendar. Then I'll go through the operating expenses for water and wastewater. Then I'll talk about the salaries and benefits. Next, Mike will talk about the water sales, purchases, and sewer revenue. Then I'll talk about the capital budget. After that, we'll go into the CalPERS UAL funding policy. Excuse me. And then we'll talk about the reserve balances, and finally, staff's recommendations. So this is our budget process timeline. On the left-hand side, we have our internal process, what staff goes through and works on. On the right-hand side are our public meetings and workshops, so finance committee meetings, board workshops. So we start planning for the budget in January. We actually had a finance committee kickoff meeting for the budget. We send out the calendar, and we request staff's feedback. Then in February, we update the budget with the audited actuals for fiscal year 2018, and we start working on the projections for 2019. And then the individual departments submit their budget requests to finance. And on February 25th, the finance committee met and went through the budget process review and calendar. And we also went over the budget versus actual for the last 5 years. In March, staff compiles the operating budget, and we complete the fiscal year 2019 projections, and we also begin working on the payroll estimates. The finance committee met on March 14th to review the operating budget requests submitted by staff. Then in April, staff incorporates the operating budget requests. We begin work on the draft capital budget, and we put those two together and start looking at the draft budget. On April 15th, the committee met, went over the preliminary salaries and benefits, and started going over the capital budget requests. Committee met again on April 29th to review the draft operating and capital budget and to discuss any committee requested items from previous meetings. Then in May, the draft budget was reviewed by management and staff and revised and refined and sent through our QA/QC process. And on May 13th, with the draft budget prepared, the committee met and started discussing our capacity to pay down our PERS. May 29th, we had a board workshop. And Director Evans, I'd like you to note I have green check marks there for the board workshop. It's been completed.
Okay. But you left a few items out just to look good.
So we had the board workshop on May 29th. We went over the proposed budget and we discussed the PERS scenarios and got direction from the board on which scenario to incorporate into the budget. So now in June, we've incorporated your requested items, including the PERS scenarios, or the PERS direction, revised and refined the budget, and hopefully it's perfect now. So today we're meeting, and hopefully we will approve the recommended budget and the PERS UAL funding policy. And that'll be the finish line. So this is page 2 of your budget, and this is going to be what I'll refer to as the home page. I'm going to keep coming back to it for each section. The top 4 sections, the debt service, the PERS UAL, the vehicles and equipment, and the capital are all funded by reserves. So that's those. And the bottom 3 are the operating expenses, including water operations, wastewater operations, and water purchases. Mike's going to talk about the water purchases in a minute, so I'm going to stick to the water operations at first, the $12.1 million. So this is page 10 of your budget, and this slide shows the total water operating budget expenses. It also shows the water purchases, which is a big portion of that at 73%, but again, Mike's going to talk about that. So the other 3 slices there is what I'll be discussing coming up. So this is page 11 of your budget. Details to this can be found on pages, by department can be found on pages 12 through 14, and the materials and services has the complete detail to those. So I tried to break this down into thousands as well, so we might have some notes coming in here to hopefully summarize that. Notable variances here are the total expenses from budget year to budget year actually increased by $400,000. The majority of that was the result of operations increasing by $324,000. That was due to transmission and distribution increasing by $120,000. We had a lot of main breaks in fiscal year 19, so we're trying to plan for those in the upcoming years. We also had pumping charge increase of $73,000, and meters increased by $90,000 because we're having to replace meters that their warranties expiring. Support increased by $200,000, mainly as a result of increases in IT and engineering studies. So back to the home page. Now I'm going to talk about wastewater operations at $14.2 million, or 15% of the budget. This slide is page 20 of your budget, and this shows the breakout of the wastewater operating expense budget. The majority of that is treatment at 50%, or $7.1 million. That's in C&I and Metal Art together. We have $3.3 million at 23% is operations and maintenance. $2.4 million is collections and conveyance. And $1.4 million, or 10%, is G&A. So this slide is a summary of page 21 of your budget. Details by department can be found on pages 22 through 24, and further details can be found in your materials and services requests. Notable changes here are that revenues are budgeted to increase by $700,000, $718 to be exact. The reason for that is that we're increasing our reclaimed water sales budget. We're in negotiations with Carlsbad and Leeuwenhoek, and we expect to receive about $600,000 more in reclaimed water sales this year.
Director Lithar.
Yeah, I've got a question on anticipated revenues, both for wastewater and the water side. Do these projections assume any rate increases within the coming fiscal year?
Yeah, yes, on average about 3.5% to 4%.
And when would those have to take place?
They are in the budget as of January 1st, but that's up to board discretion.
Okay, thank you. How about wastewater?
The same.
Thank you.
Director Snell.
You say it's at the board discretion, and I understand we could vote to have 0 rate increases at that time, but then we wouldn't be able to fund this project, correct? Would we then have to amend the budget? Let's just say hypothetically in an hour and a half from now we approve this, but then a couple months from now we do not get a majority vote to increase rates. There's going to be an issue there, right? Then does the board have, is it within our right, our ability to amend that budget at that time?
Yeah, that would be within the board's prerogative. Another option would be if the board didn't want to do any rate increases or rate increases less than are included in the budget, you could draw on reserves. So you could still fully fund the budget without rate increases, but you would draw down your
I
reserves.
got you, okay. So there are some options.
But as an add-on to that, you don't really want to draw down the reserves. You would have the people go back to the drawing board and find out where they can make cuts.
That would be an option.
And I have one other question for Wes. Wes, I know you always combine the sewer costs. Is there a way, maybe for next year, that you can break down Meadowlark as a separate entity? I'd really like to see all of its costs. I know everyone's very careful when I bring up what Meadowlark costs as to being very descriptive by omission, leaving out parts. I'd like to see what Meadowlark truly costs.
So that will be on page probably 22 or 23 of your budget, would be the detail for Meadowlark. It shows the labor, the materials and services, outside services, and the power costs for Meadowlark. And then also the materials and services request that we've provided has all of the information about all the costs that are being.
So that breaks it down and shows, does it show a P&L?
It doesn't show a P&L, it just shows the cost related to Meadowlark. Because there's really no, well, actually the reclaim sales there, so that would be another thing.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I want to see what the reclaim sales are versus what it's costing us to operate.
Reclaim's actually on page 21, so if you look at that, you can see, that's what I'm summarizing here, so you can see those as well. So if you look on page 21, you'll see the reclaimed water sales, and then if you go to page 22, I think it is, or 23, Meadowlark is actually broken out there, so if you compare the two, you'll get an idea.
Do you know what that is?
I can read it to you. Or you can
Just,
read it to
just
me.
tell us the plus or the minus of it, that's all.
Well, then it's not really a, because Meadowlark has, here, let me see. Okay, so 21, reclaimed water sales are budgeted to be $2,466,000. And then on page 23, Meadowlark plant total expenses are $2,783,000.
Okay, and that's moving for this upcoming year for which we have additional revenue coming in, is that what I understand? We're
Yes.
charging more for the reclaimed
For
water?
reclaim. And through those negotiations, we'll be recovering the total cost of our reclaimed water.
And those negotiations are incorporated in your numbers?
Yes,
So you're making the assumption that those negotiations are gonna work,
yes.
even though we're negotiating?
We're conservatively making the assumption that they're going to work. And I think, I'm pretty confident that they will.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. So that's the reclaimed water revenue that caused the increase of $700,000 in wastewater revenues. So total wastewater budgeted operating expenses increased by $1.1 million, and that's mainly as a result of an increase in treatment costs of $900,000. That $900,000 resulted from Encina paying off their PERS over the next 3 years. Those accelerated payments of that, our portion is $788,000, which caused most of this increase.
Quick question, isn't our flow to Encina diminishing and also less stringent?
Yes.
My understanding that's happened.
And I believe so in our budget overall would have decreased by about $50,000 to Encina if they hadn't paid off their PERS over the next 3 years. So we still have to send them $800,000 for their PERS.
Right.
Even though our total budget's decreasing by $50,000. That's just the operating portion.
Okay, so 50,000 is what you estimated is gonna be our savings over last year?
Well, they actually told us that.
Oh, okay.
So we used their budget, put that into our budget, and then we put in the PERS payment.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much.
So next I'll go into the salaries and benefits. This slide summarizes page 25 of your budget. And here we can see that total salaries and benefits is budgeted to increase by $740,000 or 4.8%. That's mainly a result of increases in benefits of $470,000, which resulted from increases in PERS of $290,000 and increases in other of about $120,000. And that's really as a result of the 457 matching, the additional $1,000 per employee, which is about $110,000. Salaries alone increased by $270,000 or 2.8%. And I'll go into the detail on that in the next slide. So Director Martin requested that we break out this and the salaries and benefits and show the total burden of the increase. So here we have the $270,000 increase in salaries here, broken down by its components. And the main reason for that increase are normal steps to employees of $83,000 and the asset management supervisor. Now, Director Snell had also requested that we include 8 months versus the 12 months, so it's now been modified, it's been changed. So your budget that you received, I believe it was last week, has 8 months in there. 8 months of the asset management supervisor is $71,000. The benefits are $26,000. So the full burden of the asset management supervisor for 8 months will be $97,000 for the year, and that's just for fiscal year 2020. The remaining changes in salaries are due to 3 positions that were budgeted for 6 months in 2019 because they were vacant. They were existing positions but vacant. And they've been filled and now they'll be budgeted for the full fiscal year 2020, so for the full 12 months. Also noteworthy is that per the committee's recommendation, we defunded the AGM position, and if that had been funded, it would have resulted in $169,000 in salary and $51,000 in benefits. So if that had been funded, there would be an additional $220,000 in the salaries and benefits.
Quick question, I'm a little slow. Treatment plant operator, 36,000, 8,000 benefits, 44,000, that's for 6 months.
Yes. Well, it's the difference between the 6 months last year and the 12 months this year. So
Right.
12 months of this year's salary.
So the job really pays 70,000 and 14,000 in benefits
Correct.
a year.
Yes.
Thank you.
So that's the salaries and benefits change. This next slide, my very colorful slide that you've seen before, this is the salaries and benefits summarized. So this slide, what it's intended to show is that as a result of efficient operations and management scrutinizing every position as they become available, we've been able to keep salaries and benefits pretty steady over the years, and we've actually even realized the budget to actual savings. So as you can see, over the last 5 years, salaries have been between $9.1 and $9.7 million, and benefits have been between $5.5 and $5.8 million. We've even, here the budget to actual savings, we've even achieved a budget to actual savings of on average, typically it's around 3.2%. In 2018 it was 9%, but that was due to 4 vacant positions during the year, so the actuals were lower. We had 4 retirements, we had 2 people on leave without pay, and 2 people on modified schedules. So that resulted in a really low actual number, just because those positions weren't filled, but they were budgeted for.
But the lights were still on during that whole time?
Yes. We had AC in their offices too, probably.
Yeah.
So back to page 2, the home page. Now Mike's going to go over the water purchases, sales, and sewer revenues.
Thank you, Wes. Oops. Good evening, Director Martin, members of the board. So as Wes was just showing, the water purchases make up about 33% of the entire budget, or $32.2 million. As you know, we have 3 sources of water that are coming in. Our desal water, which is contractually for 3,500 acre feet. Our OMWD contract that we have with them. The contract actually is for 2,750 acre feet, but for the last several years we've been achieving more. So we felt that it was still conservative to put in 3,000 acre feet of water in there. And any remaining water would come from the water authority. The total commodity costs are about $26.5 million. And then the fixed costs, which are the CWA fixed costs, are about $5.7 million. That's what makes up the $32.2 million.
Mike, can you tell me what the cost is per acre foot on each one?
Sure. I can do it by calculator, but offhand, I know that the desal is about $2,600 per acre foot.
Okay.
This is within about $100. I can get you an exact amount.
No, that's good, that's good.
The water authority water is about $1,400 to $1,500 per acre foot, and the OMWD water would be about $60 cheaper than that, so about $1,350 per acre foot. And I can get you those exact amounts later on.
No, don't need exact, that's
Okay.
good enough, thank you.
Thank you. So now that we see where our water is coming from, what does that mean in sales? Oops. I think I'm going to need to, hold on one second.
You just made it bigger. Okay, maybe we'll take that. Which one am I pushing? Forward? Okay.
All right, sorry about that. So what I wanted to do is kind of show a sales history over the last couple of years. The green bar is sales in fiscal year 16-17, which are about 13,200 acre feet. There is that was just coming out of the mandated cutback. So that was one of the first years of a little bit of rebound. In 17-18, we saw a bigger rebound and sold 15,300 acre feet. The blue bar is our current fiscal year, and as you guys know, as everyone knows, we've had about 4 or 5 months of really rainy weather, so that really put a damper on our water sales. So our sales were below budget by about 10%. So we're projected to come in around 13,800 acre feet. For this coming fiscal year, we're budgeting 14,850 acre feet, which is still below, it's conservative, so it's still a little bit below our 17-18, but a little bit more than what we're projecting for this fiscal year. And what I wanted to show on the next slide is just a breakdown by customer class. So when we do an analysis, we slice and dice it every different way. We look at it by meter size, we look at it by customer class, and try to see trends on what's coming on. So residential kind of follows the typical overall total, where when there's rainy weather, they'll cut back. When it's hot, they're obviously going to use more. The one that's pretty consistent is their commercial, industrial, construction, and other. They're pretty consistent. There's not too much outside watering. So we look at, I just wanted to let you guys know that we look at all that stuff when we do our projections. So that's the sales volume. What does that mean in sales dollars? For our ready to serve, which are fixed charge that we pass on to our approximate 22,000 customers, we're projected to bring in about $13.8 million, which is 30% of our budgeted revenue. The commodity sales, which is actual water sales, are about 68% or $31.8 million. And other revenue, which would include interest, some pumping charges, and some other small items, are about $1 million or 2%. What I mentioned before, 2 weeks ago, what we saw is just a sensitivity analysis. I wanted to show what would happen if we had another wet year. What would happen if we had another really hot year and people were using a lot less, a lot more water. And the goalposts that I used were the minus 10% and plus 10%. So if customers were to cut back 10% of what we're budgeting, we would see a net revenue impact of about $1.8 million. On the other end, if customers were to use 10% more water, we'd probably see a net revenue impact of about $1.9 million. And we use that sensitivity just to kind of see where we are and for our budget projections. So with that, Director Elithart asked for unbilled water, kind of like a history. And again, I'll apologize that I've always used the word water loss, which doesn't mean what I thought it meant at the time. So water loss is the, unbilled water is the big encompassing of the difference between sales and purchases. Water loss is a portion of that. So what I tried to do here is just try to delineate what are some of the things that make up the difference between our water sales and our water purchases. I mentioned in our workshop that there's a timing difference too. The water we purchase in June doesn't reflect and show until our July sales. There's always a 1 month lag. So if we had a really hot month followed by a really cool month, and you were only looking at that 1 month, the water loss would be really high positive or really high negative. So showing it over a year, it would smooth that out a little bit, but there's still a little bit from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. So under the adjustments, I put a line called timing and change in storage. The other thing that we never looked at was change in storage. What if we bought 100 acre feet, we didn't sell any, but we put it all in storage? That doesn't mean there was water loss. So I tried to account for that too. So the top line again is the timing and change in storage. What we've been doing the last couple of years is operations has also been looking at operational use, cleaning out the vectors, shutdowns, tank cleanings, things like that. So we've been keeping track of that because that is, technically it's unbilled water, but it's not really water loss. We're using that water internally. So we are keeping track of that. Director Elithart, you also asked about our internal usage. What are we using? What is the water department? I'll say department using, what is sewer using. So our internal usage for sewer is about 15 acre feet per year, give or take 1 or 2. And for the water, it's about 5 acre feet per year, give or take 1 or 2. So we are tracking that and we can budget for that as well. So when we looked at that graph before that showed the water loss, we showed 7.4, and just following that line right, if I can get it, the line right here. It really looks like it's going up, down, and it is actually from 7.4 to 2, back to 7 to 8 to 5 to 2. But when you account for some of the timing differences, change in storage, and in our operational use, it's more of a smoother line here. It's about 5 to 6 to 7%. There was an anomaly in fiscal year 16-17, which I'm still trying to find out what some of that is. But now we're flattening out about 4.25% of water loss. And some of the water loss could include things like evaporation, meter inaccuracies, theft, and so forth. So I wanted to make sure that I answered.
Director Delathar?
Yeah, so for fiscal year 1920, you don't show it on here, but the unbilled water is about, it looks like 7.5%.
I think we put it at 7.5%. And that was just a conservative number to start with.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I believe we're done with water. We're going to just talk about sewer real quick. The sewer revenues are about total are $20.7 million. And of that, the sewer service charge is about $18.2 million, which is about, shows about a 1% growth plus any rate increases in there. I believe that's my last slide. If there's any questions, I'll gladly answer them right now.
I have a question. Do you ever talk to Chris about changing his title to Water Sales Opportunity Manager? The more we sell, the better off we are. And there's lots of water. You're welcome, Chris.
Does it come with a pay increase?
Oh, sure. A stipend.
No,
A
it's
stipend.
just a
I'm
reclass.
trying, Chris, I'm trying.
Okay, so now we get to talk about the fun stuff. I know it's all been fun to hear, but we get to talk about more fun stuff. So now we'll go into the capital budget. So fiscal year 1920 capital budget, and a reminder again, this is just to approve the fiscal year 1920 budget. We do include a 10-year capital and operating plan, but we're only approving fiscal year 1920 tonight. So fiscal year 1920 capital budget is $25.4 million, or 26% of the budget. Our 10-year capital plan is $140 million. So I'm going to start talking about the $140 million, the 10-year capital plan. I'll work my way back in detail to the 25.4, just like you saw in the board workshop. It'll get a little more exciting after that because it'll be new stuff. Okay, so here's the 10-year capital plan comparing this year's to last year's. And we can see $140.2 million for the 10-year capital plan, which is on page 34 of your budget, is made up of $45 million in carryover capital projects, $40.2 million of new CIP requests, and $54.9 million of future CIP requests. Also included in the capital budget are vehicles and equipment of $688,000 for fiscal year 1920. That's down from about $800,000 in the previous year. And the total change from year to year is a $3.9 million decrease in the total 10-year capital budget. And that's mainly as a result of a decrease in new CIP requests of $3.7 million. Also notable on here is that carryover capital improvement projects decreased by $32.2 million, but that's really as a result of the land outfall being divided into phases, and the phases that will not be worked on this year were moved into future projects. So you can see the transfer there of 32.1 moving from carryover to future CIP projects, so it's really a zero change. So next, this slide shows the CIP cost by water and sewer over the next 5 years, and you can see sewer the majority of the projects. And sewer is $100.9 million of the total $140.2 million 10-year capital project. And of that $100.9 million, Encina is actually 25.6, which you can see here in the little white box. And they're about $5 million per year of the total capital project. So next, this is actually a summary of page 34. I know it's a lot of numbers. Couldn't fit them all in here, so this is really a summary of that page. And you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, $140.2 million is our total 10-year capital budget. Next to that, you'll see that it's made up of carry-forward projects of 45, as mentioned, and new requests of 95.1. The carry-forward projects in the top left, you can see that's made up mainly of the land outfall phase 1, which is the portion that remains in the carryover that wasn't transferred to future projects because it will be worked on in the current fiscal year. And the San Marcos Interceptor of $6.1 million, and that'll be completed in fiscal year 1920. So the new projects of $95.1 million are made up mainly of future projects of $54.9, which we talked about, and the $25.6 million for the Encina Wastewater Authority 5-year capital plan. So next we'll go into page 35 of your budget, and this is the 5-year and beyond capital timeline. And in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see it totals the $140.2 million for the 10-year capital plan. And now we'll talk about the $25.4 million in the bottom left for fiscal year 1920. So that's this fiscal year's capital budget. Yes,
I'm
sir.
sorry, could you go back one slide?
Yep.
And maybe this is a question for engineering. City of San Marcos Creek District, 3.5 million. What are we doing in there this year?
Yes, President Martin, so that's for the bridge projects for both Via Veracruz and Bent. So we have pipes in those bridges that the district is responsible for. And also when they reline or actually raise Discovery Street, we're leaving the sewer line in place because that's a gravity line, it has to be in place. But the water line, we don't want the water line to be 20 to 30 feet below ground, so the water line is going to be relined there. So those are primary projects that are associated with that.
And they're gonna happen this year?
According to the city, they're going to happen this year, so we have to budget according to it, but I've been
Okay.
hearing that for many years.
Thank you, yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so the 25.4, as we mentioned, is made up of the land outfall and the San Marcos Interceptor. Those are the biggest projects for the upcoming fiscal year. Also noteworthy is that in 2023, fiscal year 23, we're going to begin construction on Metal Arc Tank number 3, at least that's the plan. And in that year, we also have future projects of $6.5 million. And the following fiscal year 24, we have $17.9 million of future projects planned. All of those projects are capacity projects, and per our capacity fee model, we issue debt to fund capacity projects. So in 2023, the 5-year plan includes a plan to issue $28 million in debt in fiscal year 2023. Again, that's not being approved tonight, it's just part of our 5-year plan, but I just wanted to let you know that that's included in this 5-year forecast.
One more question, I'm sorry. I asked almost all my questions at the committee, but some of these just pop up. Metal Arc Tank number 3, $4 million. That a relining, resurfacing, new tank?
It's a new tank.
And we're gonna need a new tank at Metal Arc?
Yes, so it's not at the treatment plant. So those are the tanks that are above the hill, above kind of Lake San Marcos, facing Rancho Santa Fe, right?
Thank you. That answered that. Thank you.
Okay, so back to the home page. Now we get to talk about new stuff. Now we're going to talk about the CalPERS UAL funding, and the plan has $8,054,000 for fiscal year 1920 to be paid down this year. So this is a scenario recap from the budget workshop, and Director Martin had requested a column to show the difference between the scenarios based on, I'm going to use a benchmark of the 100% payoff, which has the most interest savings. So you'll see the column in red there. That shows the difference between each scenario and the highest interest savings. So per board direction, we've incorporated the pay over 3 years with half in 1920, and that's going to result in a payment of $8,054,000 in fiscal year 1920, approximate interest savings of $13.7 million, and it's about $1.5 million less than if we paid all off in fiscal year 1920. I hope that answers your question, Director.
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you very much.
So this next slide, I believe it was Director Sinella that requested CalPERS historical returns. So this slide actually shows, and this is
Wow.
thanks to Anthony Glenn, Mr. Anthony Glenn, the accounting supervisor. I don't want to take credit for it. So these are the historical returns for CalPERS over the last 20 years. And we can see here the blue line, the blue line is actually their target. That's not the zero line, so that's not, otherwise it makes it look skewed like they're getting really poor returns, but that's their target return. In 1999, it was 8.5%, and since then they've decreased their target to be more in line with realistic expectations. So in fiscal year 1920, as you know, it's going to be 7%. I made the zero line red so we could see where that was, just kind of make it stick out a little bit. So that's zero returns. As you can see, they've only had losses in 4 years. The losses were in 2001, 2002, 2008, and 2009. Otherwise, they've done pretty well. And overall, their average returns, the 20-year average is 6.7%, the 10-year average is 6.6%, and over the last 5 years, they've averaged 8.2% returns, which is above not their 1999 target, but their current target. So hopefully this answers your question, Director Sinella.
Very helpful, thank you.
Excellent chart.
Right back there.
Yeah, if you could ask Anthony to keep it down, he's doing a lot of talking.
Okay, so, as you know, managing the UAL with CalPERS is one of the district's most significant financial challenges. So per board direction, staff has developed a policy to fund that liability over the next 3 years. And based on guidance and concerns from the board, we plan on addressing that liability by doing the following. First, we're going to pay it off in 3 years. We're going to pay $16 million over a maximum of the next 3 years, with 1/2 in fiscal year 1920. Then we're going to have annual policy revisions. So we'll revise the policy annually as we get new actuarial reports from CalPERS. So that'll be updated and presented to the committee and to the board with those updates. We're also going to maintain flexibility. We're going to do that by not locking into any formal arrangement with CalPERS. We'll just make additional payments to pay down the UAL, and we won't be locked in anything if we decide that if the board changes direction. We're going to avoid overpaying. We're going to do that by communicating with CalPERS and by reassessing the final payment in the final year. And finally, we'll provide updates. So we'll have regular committee meetings and board workshops or whatever we need to do to provide updates to the board and to the committee. So next, this is a summary of the funding policy over the next 3 years. So as you can see, we're going to pay off $8,054,000 in fiscal year 1920. The plan is to pay off $4,027,000 in 2021 and $4,027,000 in the following year, fiscal year 2022. That's based on the 2017 actuarial evaluation, which is the latest information we have. They're supposed to be coming out with their new valuation in August or so. So sometime after August, once we've had a chance to review it and go through the calculations and look to see how it affected us, then we'll present updates to the board and the committee. And here you can see the required UAL payment. This is straight from that valuation. These numbers will change as we make additional discretionary payments. So as that happens, we'll also provide updates on those. So,
Director Sanella.
I'm surprised you didn't highlight it in the presentation, but we're doing all of this, which will result in a savings of about $13.7 million to our ratepayers. But this payoff, which is necessary and is a good thing, is not going to, it's being paid through reserves, it's not going to increase rates.
correct. Okay, so based on that, we've incorporated the PERS UAL funding policy into the budget, and now we're going to look at the reserve balances as a result of putting that into the budget for fiscal year 1920. So this chart shows the reserve balances over the last 5 years and the future projected years for 1819 and 1920. And as you can see, the sewer reserves actually decreased from 50.7 down to $38.8 million. It's mainly as a result of Encina, the interceptor, and the PERS payment. Water is decreasing from 25.4 to 20.9. That's pretty much a direct result of the PERS payment. And remember, the percentage of water and sewer, it's about 60% water based on our labor charges and 40% sewer on the PERS funding. So this slide was at the request of Director Elithar. So this shows the reserve balances for water in relation to the floor and the ceiling. The reserve policy states that we have to maintain 180 days of operating expenses and reserves as our operating reserve. And the ceiling is actually 10 years of water replacement capital assets. So the ceiling is going to be the 10 years of the replacement assets plus the operating reserve. The floor is 3 years of replacements plus the operating reserve. So, and you can see in fiscal year 19 and 20, we're actually still above the floor, we're below the ceiling, but in the outer years, what you're going to see, and you'll see this kind of illustrated in the days in cash slide, which I'll show in a few slides, there's going to be recovery. It's kind of decreasing sharply as a result of the PERS payment. We'll make 2 more of those. We won't go below the floor. We've seen that in the last presentation. And then we should see some recovery in the outer years.
Can you go back to the slide prior to this? Just an observation. The years 13, 14 to year 19, 20, we've actually about half again increased our reserves in
Yes.
both, while paying things off, which is fantastic.
Correct.
Good job.
So this is the water reserves. Here's a similar picture for the wastewater reserves. The only difference between the two, and you can see the wastewater reserves are still above the floor at $39 million and below the ceiling. The difference between the two is that the wastewater has 8 years of replacement projects in the ceiling. They age quicker, and we have more of them, so the policy has 8 years of replacement for the first sewer plus the operating reserves. And again, we'll see recovery in this. That sharp decline is Encina, San Marcos Interceptor, and the PERS funding.
And again, not to beat a dead horse, but still stronger than we were 4 years ago.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And both of them are showing increases up until 2019, and the decrease as a result of those projects in the funding. And still above our floor, so still within our target range. So the next slide was at the request of Director Evans. This shows, that's on right. This shows our days in cash, and the orange line is actually the Fitch AA rating median days in cash. They tend to be pretty high. You can see at 561 going forward. And Director Snell actually asked what our rating was back in 2009 because we were so far below the median, 214 versus the 331. So we looked into that, and we were actually rated at AA. We got that AA rating in 2005, but we maintained it through 2009 and actually until 2013 where we were upgraded to a AA+. Some of the reasons for that were we had strong debt service, capacity fee recovery, and several other rating criteria. We've maintained that AA+ rating, and we were reaffirmed in 2015 when we issued our debt refunding, and we were also reaffirmed in 2017. Now, in the outer years, you'll see a decrease in 2019 from 513 days in cash down to the 300 range, and we actually discussed this in the previous meeting. All those years stay over 300, and per discussions with our financial advisor, if we maintain that above 300 days in cash, and we have a plan to pay off our PERS along with our other rating criteria, we should be in pretty healthy financial condition and should be able to maintain our AA+ rating. So, with all that being said, staff recommends the following actions, and there are two of them tonight. The first one is to approve the Vallecitos Water District CalPERS unfunded accrued liability funding policy. And the second one is to approve Vallecitos Water District fiscal year 2019-2020 budget, which reflects the CalPERS UAL funding policy. And with that, finish line.
Excellent job. We have one speaker. Can we hear from the speaker, please? Mr. Hunsaker.
Mike Hunsaker, San Marcos. What you're doing on this labor contract is very, very unusual. Most cities have been for years saying, well, if as long as we're 80% of our liability, we're in good shape. That isn't quite true since it's so expensive to fund these pensions as it is. So what you're doing here is a pleasant surprise, even if it is expensive. I did have a couple of questions, and one of them is on the desal water. Now, according to the County Water Authority, we didn't get any desal water last year, but we were required to pay for it. Now, are we getting desal water or not? And when do we start? Or are we still in the same price fix? And I just wanted to point of perspective. I looked at the 2011-2012 budget, and it was about $29.5 million. Now we're looking at $90 million plus after just 8 years. This has been a terrific amount of cost increases. I'm looking forward to seeing what we're going to do in capital improvements, because according to, I understand, state law, according to the BIA, you can only charge people capital improvement fees that cover the next 3 years of their particular usage. But plans are typically 5 years, and we're something like 10 years and counting and coming up with new capital fees. So it seems like we have a little bit of disconnect in here on how to set capital capacity fees. Thank you.
Question for staff.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Maybe it's the same one, but I wasn't here in 2012. Is that correct that our total budget, water and sewer, was $29 million in 2012?
Yeah, I wasn't here either. I don't know what the numbers were then.
I was going to direct General Manager Proom to answer those three questions that were asked.
All right.
Well, so correct me if I missed something, but one of the questions was, are we getting the desal water?
Yes.
The answer is yes.
Okay.
So it is true that in calendar year 18, we did not receive desal water. In March of 2019, it was reestablished, I think it was March 7th. Desal water was, the pipeline was reconnected. We are currently getting it as of today. I think over the last several days, they had a problem with the water quality reaching the plant itself. So there was a couple of days that we were without desal water, but it wasn't as a result of the connection being shut off.
Second question?
I think there was a pricing question in there, and during the outage, we were paying the
No.
contractual price, okay.
That's question one. The question one is not question two.
Second one, I may ask James to come up and answer the question about the cap fees. Mr. Hunsaker said something about limiting it to a 3-year period of time. I'm not exactly sure what he's referring to, but James, if you can address that.
And I know some of this is closed session stuff, but
Sit down.
it's all right. But I think, it's fair for the speaker to know that we are in ongoing discussions with the Water Authority regarding that matter and possible refund, for lack of a better way to put it. So it's not resolved.
That's the reason we had to get deep into it.
So to answer Mr. Hunsaker's question, he's partially correct. If an agency doesn't have an adopted planning document that follows a strict guideline with a programmatic EIR to go along with it, then I don't know if it's 3 years or 5 years, but it's limited. You can only charge within this limited time. I believe previous legal counsels have told me different amount of years, so I'm not too sure how many years. But if you have a guideline document like a master plan with a programmatic EIR that's been certified, then you could do the full planning horizon in your cap fees, and there's no issue with that.
Thank you. And the third question?
I think Wes will handle the third question.
So the budget for I'm not sure which year you mentioned, if it's 2011 or 2012, but I have both available. If you're comparing apples to apples, which is a total budget, 2011, our total overall budget, which is the graph. Let me show you the page 2, which is our home page. Gotta have like 6 of them in here, right? Oh, right there. Okay, so here it says $98.1 million. In 2011, our total budget was $95.9 million. In 2012, our total budget was $99.4 million.
Oh.
Same graph, same budget, same page 2.
8 years ago, we were $1 million more? Sorry, just clarifying.
Yes.
So,
Thank you. All right, so now, do we have any questions of staff on the board?
No, but
If not, make a motion.
just a comment for our public relations, but there might be a Facebook post in this somewhere along those differences between 2012 and 2019. Maybe.
I've got a comment as well. I'm just a little bit concerned with putting in the assumption of a rate increase January 1st. I wonder if the general manager can talk about maybe the timing of how we get to that.
Sure, I can do that. So staff is in the process of selecting a rate consultant to help us. We sent out an RFP, we received some proposals. We'll eventually review those proposals, select a consultant, and with the plan being that we'd go through a Proposition 218 hearing sometime in the October or early November timeframe, so that we can make a final rate determination in December. There's a required 45-day period to go through there. And then with the assumption that we'd start, invoke any rate increases January 1 of 2020. So that's the timing.
Any other questions of staff? If not, need a motion? I'll move to approve.
Second that.
There's a motion and a second. Do we need a roll call on this?
Would you like to do it?
We'll do it, yeah. We'll do it with our little,
Oh, a machine,
On your vote.
yeah.
hot dog,
All right.
$500,000. But
Mine didn't light up.
mine didn't either.
Yeah, mine's saying about, floor, language.
Language, send call. Call operator.
Oh, cost savings.
Something got dim there,
That's
yeah.
really great.
Insurance headphones, oh my gosh.
Let's just do an oral one.
Well, yeah, something's not right with it right now.
Sure, let's just do oral.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Okay, I'm Director Ellithorpe,
Yes.
Director Evans,
Yes.
Director Hernandez.
Yes.
Director Sinella,
Yes.
Director Martin.
Yes,
Thank you.
unanimous. Thank you very much.
If I could, please?
Yes,
I
sure.
just would like to make one comment, and it's a compliment to the Finance Committee, to the staff for the effort that went into this budget, for excellent presentations, for answering all of our questions, down to, I'll get right back to you and pull out my calculator, for putting in the new graphs and responding to the questions. I am really proud and impressed and feel like we really have an informed decision today that we've made, and I really appreciate that. Thank you for cracking the whip on them. I'm sure they wouldn't have done it without your help.
And thank you for bringing it up, and I'd like to add to that. The last couple of years, but especially this year, every question that was asked could be asked. You had all the answers. Never once did you have to do a soft shoe dance. You knew the answers, you had it there, you gave it to us. Great job by all, including the quiet one in the back. Great job by everybody. Mike, great job showing us. Thank you for not bringing out all your spreadsheets. We didn't need to see it, just tell us.
I'll give you a break this time.
Yeah, thank you, I appreciate that. Director Seiler.
Yeah, just the,
Oh, I forgot you're the chair.
yes, please.
I forgot, I'm sorry.
It's all good. I've chimed in without going to you first a few times tonight, and so I'm guilty of it too. I just want to just pile on the process because I think it's been very good, and I agree with Director Evans and Director Martin. You guys have all been part of this over the last 5 years that since I've been on the board, and General Manager Pruitt may not have witnessed some of the old times, but and some of the staff who have been here a while have. There's been some pretty heated arguments and discussions and debates over our budget process that went on for not just hours and hours during an individual meeting, but many meetings, hours and hours over many meetings. And so to be able to go through this process and have all the information provided by staff and all the answers, all the questions answered in a way that we all can understand it is really good. And I just can't leave tonight without really stressing that, we all know that the cost of materials, the cost of medical benefits, the cost of retirement benefits, the cost of labor, all of these things have gone up significantly over the last decade. We are, from what I heard tonight, operating this water district for $1 million less this year than we were 7-8 years ago. That's just mind-boggling.
Yeah.
And kudos to everybody involved with that.
Could I, I'm sorry, did you?
Go ahead, Cynthia.
I just wanted to add, and I should have said it earlier, I want to also, it's not just the Finance Committee. There's a lot of deep appreciation that needs to go to all the department heads, supervisors, who sit down and analyze exactly, how soon do we have to change the tires, and can someone go a little longer without this or that? I think there's been a lot of details that we don't even get to see happening before the information goes to you. And that's just kudos to an amazing approach of putting the ratepayers first. So thank you, all the way down.
And with that, you get a car, and you get a car, and you get,
Not quite.
great job, okay. And we're gonna move on to item 2.2, agricultural water eligibility.
Yeah, so Chris is actually going to take this item. This is an item that went before the policy committee a while ago, so we're just bringing it forward to the board, give an update.
This is the same as the socialism.
Oh,
type of
jeez.
thing, isn't it?
Your words.
Try not eating. Then you don't have to worry about it.
Thank you, President Martin. This is going to be a little humbling. I have to admit that the PowerPoint that you just saw from the finance manager is going to be a lot better than the PowerPoint you're going to see from the public information supervisor.
Oh my gosh, it's points
It's
off
just the
for
way the
sure.
world's going to turn. It's really painful, but
You
this
didn't have Bridget do it
this
for you?
isn't one that's just that exciting to, it just doesn't lend itself to a PowerPoint unless I show you lots of graphics of people's land. This is about agricultural water eligibility. This has been brought to the Public Information Personnel Policy Committee a few times. As you recall, back in May of 2018, a gentleman named Robert Case showed up. He had purchased 13 acres kind of in the northern Twin Oaks area. Property was initially raw, unimproved land. He intended to farm on the property, and he was asking myself, that's the other hat I wear, is agricultural water, and he was asking for an agricultural water rate. Just background on agricultural water, the County Water Authority's TSAR program, Transitional Special Agricultural Water Rate, was implemented back in October of 2008, and it's been re-added on several different times, most recently back in 2015, and it's been extended through December 31st of 2020. So it's still viable. Some of the conditions for the agricultural water is that it's really designed to be used for agricultural purposes, which means much more than just growing a little garden in your front yard. Basically for human consumption, for the market, for agricultural, horticultural, floricultural, feeding fowl, livestock, that type of those types of requirements. Minimum of 1 acre densely planted for commercial purposes. The account must have been enrolled in what was formerly Metropolitan Water District's agricultural water program back in January 1st of 2009. So the agricultural water accounts are subject to verification, so typically staff will go out and visit certain ones if they don't, especially if they don't be able to produce receipts. Most customers will submit their picking ticket from the agricultural entities from the farms, and that, or tax documents, and that's how you can prove it. And important to add in is that the meter and the account must be in compliance with all Vallecitos regulations. Important to keep that in mind. Vallecitos has its own separate agricultural water rate, separate from the County Water Authority's TSAR rate. Back in the drought and 2007-2009, the district was approached by customers that really had some difficulty with the restrictions for the TSAR water. The TSAR water requires the customer to be the first one to cut back in times of drought. And there were certain avocado growers typically that were very frightened for their grove and saying, if you have to cut back 30%, I can't let my grove survive. So what do you want me to do? And so that's how the certified non-participating agricultural water rate came about. It's not as good of a deal as the County Water Authority's TSAR water, but it was something that was viable, and it wouldn't restrict their access in times of drought. The ordinance for that, the certified non-participating water was put under was Ordinance 165 back in June of 2009, and initially had the same restrictions as CWA's TSAR water. So the ag water was grandfathered, so we've denied requests for new agricultural water. It was always a requirement that you had to be enrolled in Metropolitan's program to have either of the ag rate programs. Unfortunately, the current Ordinance 207 is silent on the subject of the certified non-participating water, which was just odd and strange, and was what prompted me to bring this item before the board back in 2018. There was no specific reason for the ordinance to be silent, at least nothing that I could find. I talked with BB&K's attorney, Kelly Salt, and she recommended that this be corrected in future ordinances. That was her recommendation. There's currently requests. You saw Robert Case, he's the one that came in here, but there was two gentlemen that showed up as well from Hoctoconoko, the mushroom farm, and they also were interested. And from that time, there's been a lot of customers that have reached out to me over the past year asking for it. One of them is a pending customer in that the person was deciding on whether to buy the property and wanted to know whether he could have the ag rate before he purchased it. So it's a pending request. The fiscal impact of this is rather significant. certified non-participating agricultural water customers are charged a flat rate. It's at our tier 2 rate. So they never really get tier 1, they never get tier 3. It's just flatlined at tier 2. So that can be helpful, but it's not as low as the TSAR water. What that translates to is any customer that would get into the tier 3, where it would be $8.87 per HCF, we would see as a district a decrease in revenue of $4.27 per each HCF sold. Now, how does that translate into a specific customer? Well, that mushroom farm, Mike Arthur helped me calculate it out, and just using the most recent year's data, it would be a loss of revenue to the district of $81,000, almost $82,000. It's not an insignificant amount. As an example of a smaller customer, there was a gentleman Michael wrote, smaller residential customer, 5/8 inch residential meter, and if that individual was to be transferred to an ag rate, the loss in revenue to the district would be more like $1,300, so it changes very much.
Question?
Certainly. Right.
So, Chris, just to clarify, when you say loss of revenue of roughly $82,000, you can define it as loss of revenue, or you can define that as $82,000 that all the other customers are going to have to pay for. One way or the other, right?
That would be reasonable to say.
Okay.
Chris, what's our cost for Metropolitan for water per acre foot?
Well, for the treated cost, it was.
Treated cost, yeah.
It was, as Mike said earlier, it was $14.65 or whatever per acre foot. So to do the math on per HCF.
Thank you.
Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, Mike's working on it already. Got a quick staff back there.
2 million lines of data right there.
Yeah.
About 340-ish. It'd be around $3.40 per.
So it's costing us about $3.40, and we're selling it for $4.60.
The county water authority says cost us that. When we look at our whole blended rate, I believe our average, including all the desal, our average is probably $3.72 per acre, per unit of water.
Okay, but we wouldn't necessarily, I'm trying to think of the ag customers, we wouldn't necessarily be selling them a desal we're under contract for and a Levenhigh we're under contract for, so extra waters would be coming from the county water authority. So that would be at the $3.40 rate.
Correct.
Okay. So now we're talking $1.20 per acre foot is how much we'd be discounting it. So is there a loss there, Director?
I thought it was the other way, sir.
Yeah.
I thought it was for something.
Yeah, you're selling it at tier 2 rates.
We're selling it for $4.60 and we're buying it for $3.40.
Sell it for.
So we're making $1.20.
Oh, I thought you said it the other way around.
No, I'm sorry, we're making $1.20.
Yeah.
I guess my question is, does that, the way I'm going, does that make sense to you, or am I looking at it wrong?
We would still have
So we're
we
still
would still
making a
make more, yes.
Until they went into tier 3.
And that $3.40 doesn't include any fixed charges or any other operational charges, pumping charges, anything that they have to inject into the water. So that's just the commodity cost.
Okay, so we'd have to add pumping charges if they were in a zone, and we'd have to, okay. But, okay.
And if I could just clarify, we don't view it as making money, and we're not a for-profit entity, so when we sell it for more, it balances out in the long run, our total revenue and our total costs balance.
Yeah, okay, making was the wrong word. I'm trying to figure out a way to put it in there so it's not costing everyone else money for us to do this.
Well,
Because my mind says it is, but I'm trying to figure out if there's a way it isn't, and I'm missing it.
if you do a cost of service study and you make certain assumptions on how much water you're gonna sell at each rate to determine what you should charge at each rate, and then those assumptions change based on how you actually sell water, then you could say that you're not making as much as you would have otherwise made. If that customer would have been using tier 3 water and now he gets tier 2 water, you're getting less revenue than you would have otherwise gotten.
Which has to be borne by the rest of the customers.
Yeah, or it comes out of reserves.
Okay, so
Right, to
way I
supplement,
looked
you're
at it
gonna have
originally
to
is
pull it out of
correct.
reserves, because you can't charge a rate higher than the proportional cost to each parcel, so.
Right. Okay, thank you. Don't forget that.
So the PAP committee's recommendation was that the board wait until the cost of service study is done and that before making any decisions about the agricultural water rate or developing a pilot program, that we just push this to the cost of service study and maybe review possibly irrigation rates and agricultural interest, both existing and new customers, so that can just be studied. I would also recommend, staff recommends, that the text in the future ordinances be real clear about whether you can get the agricultural water or not, and make sure we don't leave it ambiguous and silent like the previous ordinance was.
And you may want to place limits on how much agricultural water is available to the community at large. It can't be an unlimited amount.
Well, yeah, okay. But then it begs the other question, so now do we come with a special rate for people that own laundries? Because they use a lot of water, we charge them a lot to pick up. Or car washes. Other people that use a lot of water, that we use car washes, and not all of us, but some of us actually go to laundromats, and they pay more, so you pay more. So should we subsidize those as well? Just begs the question. Sir?
Chris, I think I heard once that some of the agencies that have this agricultural rate, they're actually selling raw water.
Right.
Is that the case?
That does happen quite often, more in the northern parts of the state, in the Central Valley and things like that. Within an urban area such as ourselves, I don't think there's a whole lot of that. I mean, it's typically treated water, although maybe some of the more outlying agencies such as Valley Center, I'm going to turn and look at Ed. Yeah. Well, mostly in an urban area, there's just one distribution system and it's treated
We don't
drinking
have
water.
access to raw water, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lake San Marcos?
Well, and then there are, according to Director Hernandez, a lot of wells out there and groundwater in that area too, which is technically raw water, right? But just a couple of comments about kind of the presentation, but also the going forward. I do agree that we should, if we need to strengthen our language in our ordinances, then I'm all for doing that. I would love nothing more than to be able to help out the folks that are in the ag world with some sort of agricultural rate if we had access to raw water. But I personally have no appetite to really even have staff waste more time on this at this point, for lack of a better way of putting it, knowing that anything that we were to do to reduce the cost of the cost of agricultural water, which is really just drinking water, would be burdened by the rest of our customers. That doesn't sound like it's right nor fair, and I don't have the appetite to even really pursue this any further.
May? I certainly don't feel that we should give them a benefit that the other ratepayers pay for. I do think that an agricultural rate, it can be a benefit, but the way that TSAR is set up, you get the rate because you take the gamble of what happens during a drought. And most of the time, it proves beneficial that you got a lower rate and you sold your products and life went on as usual. But they take that gamble, and I think in particular, I can understand why the mushroom company, they can't take the gamble. They need that something needs water. It's like I have fish and I suddenly will pull the water away. You can't do that. But some of the others, I think that's the most fair way to offer it, as long as the service that they receive is different than everyone else is paying, then you can explain why you're giving them a deal. But it would be very difficult to have us support it. I think that since we are going to be doing a cost of service study, I think there is some benefit that they go ahead and research this, because agriculture is important and small agriculture is actually a growing trend. And I would like to support that as a business and as an opportunity for people. But definitely agree in this sense with Director Sinella that we can't do something that puts us in a spot where we're having the ratepayers themselves pay for it. And that would be the challenge for the cost of service study to show us if it's even doable.
Directors?
No, I agree, and that's why we, at the policy committee, we wanted to do this cost of service, because I'm actually not sure if, with an agricultural rate, we would be having our other ratepayers make up the difference, because it's all dollars going into the sales of water that balance out at the end. So with the cost of service study, I think that'll come out specifically as to, I hope, that we're not going to be harming the rest of our ratepayers, but providing a necessary service to the agricultural community.
And that's certainly the intent of the cost of service study. They would look into those specific issues.
Yes, thank you.
A question that I have on the cost of service study is, and I have my rose-colored glasses off, you're gonna need, if you do this, you're gonna need someone, or you can open another position, to go out and check they have 1 acre and check, I mean, who's gonna do that? Who's gonna check to make sure that we're not being fibbed to? Not that anybody would ever do that.
True enough. One of the things that sort of makes my job a little easier is we do have the GIS system and the Google Maps system on the internet, and I can look at a lot of things just from my desktop and actually see whether somebody has an orchard or not, just from my desk.
May.
Okay. Director Evans?
Well, in regards to that, though, I would assume that would be part of a cost of service study, is if it requires a new position, that's part of the cost of presenting it. And that, to begin with, I don't know for sure, but that's kind of putting the cart in front of the horse at this point. I think first we just even see if there's a place. I think that's a good recommendation.
Well, the idea is, I think cost of service study, we do enough crazy surveys around here, might as well do that one. But I agree with Director Stone, I have absolutely no appetite on our ratepayers, our homeowner ratepayers paying more because of it. So if the cost of service study looks like it's gonna show that, you're wasting your time doing it, in my opinion. So. Director Elfart.
I agree with Director Evans and Sinella and Hernandez on at least looking at it.
Sorry, you're out. He doesn't agree with you.
I thought we all said the same thing.
Okay, I agree with everything.
Yeah, just me.
I thought they said the same thing. I didn't use the word appetite, though. I didn't have to use that.
You used the word appetite. You stole it. It's all good.
Oh, I would never do that. Did you get direction?
That was
No.
very clear, right?
Is that what you're looking for?
Please.
Yeah, we are looking for direction. Our recommendation is that we include it in the cost of service study.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes,
That's a good.
Sure.
there you go.
Is including it in the cost of service study going to increase the cost of the study?
I don't believe so. I think in the RFP that we put together, that was one of the things we asked them to look at.
Oh, so we've already committed to pay for it. So
Yeah.
why did we even do this?
We haven't signed a contract. We haven't selected a consultant, we haven't signed a
There's a
contract.
finance committee, why? I don't know. Okay. Moving on to item 2.3, approval of consumer confidence report. This is always a high point.
Yeah, so this is an item, I don't believe there's a staff report in there, but there is a copy of the CCR, and Ed's gonna walk you through what we can and can't do with the consumer confidence report.
Thank you, General Manager Broom, President Martin, members of the board. You've seen this water quality report every year. It doesn't change much from year to year. We update our population numbers. If we have new facilities, they might be in there. The wording, other than our information that's in there about our district, is regulated by the feds and by the state. So the doom and gloom words, I've heard that before from the board, we can't change. Those are requirements. The main thing on this every year that I'm happy to report again is all of the federal and state regulations we have met and in most cases exceeded for water quality. We've had no violations, and happy to answer any questions on it. It's a pretty straightforward report.
And this item does, we do require an approval of the board.
Yeah, I was just waiting to see if there's questions.
Yeah.
Second.
I move for approval.
Move a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. We do have one speaker on it. Mr. Hunsaker, 2.3.
Mike Hunsaker, San Marcos. When I did talk with the county authority, they were adamant there was no desal water whatsoever that was delivered to
This item,
Vallecitos last
2.3?
year. And I see in the water confidence report, we have a reading for the Poseidon plant. And I noticed that it's fairly high in TDS for what I would expect for desal water. Now, where is that water being mixed? And what are the components of this TDS that's appearing? And also, I noticed boron was very, very high out of Skinner. There's been some concerns about Skinner. I'd like you to address that.
General Manager?
Go ahead, Ed, you can address it.
So as far as the desal water, we didn't receive any direct through our connection, but we did receive desal water throughout the year, just like the rest of the county. It is pumped up to the Twin Oaks Reservoir area, where our Twin Oaks reservoirs are, the Twin Oaks Valley treatment plant that's owned by the San Diego County Water Authority. It goes into their clear wells and it blends with the water that's being produced there at their treatment plant. And then it's brought down through the rest of the county. TDS for the desal water is actually quite lower. I'm not sure which column Mr. Hunsaker is looking at, but the TDS for the desal plant is typically in between the 200 to 300 range. When we're getting it from the Colorado River, that exceeds 600, which is extremely hard water, lots of total dissolved solids. That's what TDS stands for. The TDS that's in the desal water is actually minerals they add back to the water. So after it comes out of the RO plant, it's practically zero. And you cannot put that clean of water into any of our pipes. It will dissolve the cement lining, it'll go right through the steel. You know, they call water the universal solvent. When I taught, I used to say that H2O is a very social compound. It wants everybody to join the party, so it does not like to be by itself. But they have to add minerals back into that desal water to keep it from dissolving the lines. And was there another
Boron.
question? The boron. Typically, the boron levels are higher actually on the desal plant, so I'm not sure about coming out of the Skinner plant, but ocean water, boron is one of the things that doesn't quite filter all the way out going through the reverse osmosis membrane. So we have seen an increase in boron just from the desal water.
I have just one quick question. This particular information is what's required by the state?
By the state and the federal.
And these are all, I'm assuming, ways we could collect water, whether we do or we don't. I mean, if we decided we weren't, which we couldn't do, but we weren't going to take anything from Twin Oaks treatment plant for 3 months, the fact that it's available to us, the state would require that we report what they've told us. Is that correct?
Yes, if you take any water from any of the treatment
place.
plants at any
Exactly.
time, then you have to report anything that was found. This report does not show a whole lot of numbers in it, but there's far more tests that are performed throughout the year at all of these treatment plants. So you may see maybe 30, 40 different constituents that are shown here, both at the plant and then what we find in our own distribution system are reported. But there's over 150 tests that happen, and if they're non-detect, meaning they didn't detect anything, we don't have to report.
And I was going to say, the stuff that comes from Skinner, if we could do other things to it to change what our own water is.
At an expense.
At an expense, but it's a possibility. And I think some of the confusion with the Carlsbad treatment plant is, I'm not sure all of us as the lay people and ratepayers understand, we get direct from it when the valve is open.
Correct.
But the rest of the time, we're getting a portion that's blended by any water we get from the County Water Authority, correct?
As General Manager Prum mentioned, since March 7th, that pipeline connecting, the direct connection is back online, And so anytime we're bringing our, what's called our Vallecitos 9 connection online, if you remember from your tours over on Cherokee and Pawnee, that is now coming straight out of the desal plant. So we're getting straight desal water.
And you
again.
do monitor it now
Yes.
ourselves to make sure that
Yes,
we're
we do.
getting it. But I think that's kind of the confusion, because there's desal, and then there's also desal that's blended, but I don't know that the actual ratepayers understand how unique Vallecitos is, and that we are getting a certain portion directly.
Right.
And then another portion we get just if we take any water from the water authority. Thank you.
Director Snell?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Director Evans, and I was confused, and I know that we're in this ongoing discussions, but I just learned tonight in our closed session, or maybe not learned's not the right word, but was made a better understanding around the whole desal matter, and I know the speaker seems to be really interested in it, so I think it's important to note that North County region, including San Marcos, including Vallecitos customers, were receiving desal water all last year. It was just through a different pipe. So I know there's a lot of other aspects to this, but I don't think it's accurate or truthful to say that our customers were not getting desal water last year. So.
Correct.
Thank you. Anyway,
Any other questions?
did we approve it? We did.
No, I don't.
We
Yep,
did.
it's already approved.
Consider it approved.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Item 3.1, General Manager Report.
Actually, we have one more action item.
We do, I'm sorry.
2.4?
Oh, nomination for Aqua Region 10 Board.
Do we
Yes,
need to do that?
do we have a decision?
Is it due right now?
It's due on June 28th, I believe.
I believe you had a stay of execution at the last meeting.
Yes.
Right. Well, I will reapply, okay?
That
If you
answers
guys
that.
will support me.
That answers that. Okay.
So this
Thank
will,
you.
this
Not
will,
one vote.
let me clarify, so thank you for that. This will have to come back to this board on next meeting because we need a resolution supporting that and it's not included here. So we'll prepare a resolution, put it on the next meeting, put Director Evans' name on it, and then it'll be part of the packet submitting her interest.
And that's on the, when's the next meeting? The 19th?
The 19th, next Wednesday.
Now moving on to 3.1. General Manager's Report.
Yeah, just two quick items. On June 22nd, so not this Saturday, but the following Saturday, we're going to be having an open house here. So it's kind of similar to our water academy, but we don't do the field tour. So there's no buses, we're not driving people around. It's basically spend the morning with your water district personnel. I think we're going to feed them lunch and provide the information we normally do. Board members are certainly welcome and encouraged to attend. We already have 80 people signed up.
Oh, good.
Doesn't mean 80 people are going to show up, but 80 people have
What
signed up.
time does it start?
I can't remember. We'll put something on the website. I think it's like 8:30 or 9 o'clock. Chris
Now,
gave me
this
something.
this is not in lieu of doing the buses. That's still gonna happen this year.
That's going to happen in the fall. So I have it. It's Saturday, June 22nd from 8:30 till 12:30, right here at the district headquarters. And again, not this Saturday, the following Saturday.
22nd.
Oh, good.
So in the fall, we will have the standard water academy with the bus tour and everything. This is kind of a reduced version because we have gotten some feedback from people before that it's too long of a time commitment. They'd like to attend, but they don't want to spend a whole day. So we're going to try this, and if it works out, we'll do it again. So if it doesn't, this may be the only one. And the other item I just wanted to bring up, and the board's probably aware of it, but it looks like the state of California is approving its budget, and it does not include a water tax. So it's kind of the final piece of the puzzle that there's going to be no water tax, at least in this year's budget. And
So they took the money out of the air.
yeah, the cap and trade. Yeah, the state identified cap and trade and a few other sources to backfill the money that they were trying to get through a water tax. Doesn't mean it won't come up in the future.
This Monday?
Let's hope it does not.
And that's all I had.
Okay. District Legal Counsel.
Clint, my item on the water tax. I need to reverse the order here.
He likes to do that.
He does like to
Yeah,
do
he
that.
does.
Just in time, first and right.
That's true. The other thing is the third edition of California Water has come out, and you either received or should be receiving a copy of that. It was sent out. So California Water, the book,
California Water by Art Littleworth and Eric Garner, so.
I got mine signed by Eric, and I feel honored.
Oh. So those should be in the mail to you. Thank you.
Okay, Santa County Water Authority.
Well, the Water Authority, we've been holding a lot of workshops for the budget, and we've also had a lot of closed session time. The few interesting things I thought that I'd share is earlier on, a few months back, we talked about how the Water Authority has that inline virtual to clean the pipes. I'm trying to get the words out. So
The pipeline condition assessment.
yes.
Virtual reality.
Okay. Well, the Water Authority actually is the one who created that tool. And they just applied for a patent, and they've already been asked by Northern California wants to use it, and someone up in Washington State. So it was interesting that they brought up, so one of the questions was, so do we let other people use it before the patents? And then if we do it to benefit the water world, or should we be making a profit on it? I thought it was an interesting question that came up on
What
that.
they come out with as an answer.
And it was just a question, and since we didn't, this was just a comment in a chair's report. So it wasn't something to discuss or anything like that. It
Can
was
you keep us
just,
posted as that discussion continues?
wait and see if we get a patent, I think is what they're thinking, but it'd be continued. But I thought, they've actually created several things, but I think this is one of the few they've applied for a patent, and they were very proud of that.
If they do get a patent, just an observation, they should lease it. Don't sell it, lease it.
I would think.
That's where the money's at.
A license.
Lease it, we'll lease it out.
Well, I guess in a program like that, they call it licensing, so you can just keep recharging.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because nobody thought about when they decided to go for the patent, is this a responsibility to other public agencies to share it? It was just a thought, so everybody's kind of waiting to see. The second thing that had to do with money making is that, they've been slowly pushing hydroelectric, and it was a big controversy about 3 years back. It's gotten more and more acceptance, and now, everybody's looking for hydro energy storage as well. But the facilities that they have, Lake Hodges and Vicente Dam, and what's the third one? There's three that make energy.
Oh, Olivia.
When we, is it Olivenhaven?
Well, Livenhaven and Hodges.
That would be with Lake
connected.
Hodges. No, it's a small place that sometimes it's on and sometimes off. But what's interesting is 3.5 years ago, the goal was it was worth it if we could generate $500,000 a year. This year, they will create $3.4 million on what they've done. And it's just gone amazingly well, and that was the big controversy. That was a couple of nice moments for them. And then I also wanted to say that we had mentioned earlier about where the Water Authority is in dealing with its member agencies, and we mentioned the possible about the de-annexation of Fallbrook. And I just wanted to say that they are, as we've said, in a very interesting place with all that's gone on right now and under a lot of scrutiny from a lot of the agencies. And I really do think that the leadership team right now is looking at, we need to focus internally and take care of our own people first. And there were just several comments made, and I just thought you'd like to know. It doesn't mean they'll do it right away or anything, but definitely spoken by many agencies that we need to work on working together. Yes, Jim?
You talked earlier about the
Director
workshop.
Hernandez.
Yes, with the budget.
I'm sorry, what?
You talked earlier about the budget that you were working on. You recall a meeting or so ago, we talked about the study that was going to be done.
Conveyance.
Pardon?
The conveyance
Yes.
option?
And what was the outcome, if any,
Well,
on
the
that?
outcome of that is basically when it actually got down to full discussion, it seems like the majority have already accepted it as worthwhile. There's a lot of focus. They brought up the first 3 studies, and what they've shown, they felt is that the reason they want to look at it now is it's an entirely different perspective. Originally, it was to get water for us only. That's what the first 3 searches were. This one, they want to focus on a much more regional approach. They want to see tie-in like with how can that, if we can do this, how can we help the Salton Sea? How can we help different areas? And one of them is the Sweetwater Authority, and I don't know the details. Help them get into what they need in their area. How can we use it to put water in Lake Mead if necessary? What do we need to do legislative to possibly use this to, because of current legislation, we would have to sell it within the state. Can we sell it to other states? Can we use it internationally? And they added, it was kind of a surprise, they looked at 3 routes, but they were talking about the 2 southern ones. Now they've added a northern route again, and that would bring it up to the north through Fallbrook, kind of Fallbrook and Rainbow. And I thought maybe they're thinking maybe we need to do something different. So they're looking not just for here, but as a much more exploratory, and on the list of priorities of the first part of the search, they have private-public sharing of costs and partnerships. They're looking at a lot of legislative possibilities, and they're thinking much bigger than just here.
Okay, good.
So based on that, I feel it's a good thing. They do have an off-ramp. I would prefer there were a few more direct off-ramps, but I feel that most people are willing to go forward at this time. And speaking of it, it pretty much finished up our workshop day. We do adopt the budget or not on the 27th, and that's also when we have a public hearing for the rate hearing. Is that right? Public hearing on rates. So there's something else I'll tell you about. So it's interesting.
All right, Encina Wastewater Authority?
Oh, yeah.
Mr. President?
I'm sorry.
When the Water Authority has these hearings on their rates, do they get a lot of public input down there? I mean, I'm just curious. Do they get a lot of people to show up? Like we typically get, a few dozen people.
No,
We get some, but not terribly. Not at least not on the other ones. There hasn't been.
It's interesting because so much of what goes into our cost of providing water is based off of the cost of the imported water. And a lot of it is beyond our control, as you know. So it might behoove us to put some more, not immediately, but maybe in the future, discuss some more awareness about what the cost of water really means. And maybe for folks who are sensitive to the cost of water, get them more involved a little earlier on in the process and direct them down to the root of where that decision's being made. Because I'm always a little bit, as both a ratepayer myself and a board member of one of the member agencies, I sometimes wonder, are they being we do all these things to be as efficient as we can, and as we talked about earlier, we're operating today at a lower budget than we were 8 years ago. So I think we've done a good job, but I would like to know kind of like, are they doing as much work and cutting as much and stuff as we are to help save the money?
Well, I would like to say, although I probably don't ask the same questions that you would ask or get the same answers, and you're welcome, I can get you a copy of the budget if you'd like to see it. They really do work very hard to be financially responsible. And they have cut down on lots of staffing, and they brought it down, and they checked their things, and they're very proactive in that sense. And I would say most of the time, what they don't do and makes it difficult is like this issue with the conveyance. You'll suddenly have things come in front of you, and we can do it ourselves. Sometimes the timing is such, you don't really get a chance to, between a board meeting once a month, to really sit down and discuss all the minute details. So you're depending on staff to give that. But I find that the board as a whole does ask a lot of questions in reference to that. And they're pretty detailed in the report. The finance department is not as good as ours. But they do a lot of ways of keeping themselves at the AAA, and we just, what do you call it when you refund, debt refunds? Yes, they've done that several times and made a huge amount, millions and millions of dollars of savings.
Yeah.
They've done a wonderful job on, they're working just kind of tagging behind us on their OPEB and that. So they're really concentrating, you know.
It's good to hear.
But there's a lot of money that goes into things like litigation that, however, the goal for the next 2 years is to reduce legal
Litigation,
costs.
yeah.
That was stated as one today, that we need to bring it in and take away some of the outside. So I really think their goal is they're trying to get away from mitigation, which could be useful for us too.
Yeah, cool, thank you.
You're welcome. Would you like a budget?
No, that's not necessary, just
Okay.
curious.
Encina Wastewater Authority, Capital Improvement Committee.
The committee meeting is next Wednesday, and do we have an alternative for my position there? Because I'm not going to be there, and unless I make arrangements to do it remotely, which...
Yeah, I'll have to check. I think I'm an alternate, but I don't know if President Martin could also serve as that in that
Oh,
capacity.
okay.
Carlsbad does it all the time.
Yeah.
They have their guy go to both meetings. 'Cause
Really?
she's not available. Yeah.
Huh,
Was it Keith?
Keith?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Keith makes it over to our meetings.
All right, well, I'm gonna talk to Mike tomorrow to see about doing a remote attendance.
Yep.
I know it's late and yada yada, but I will inform the manager before the end of tomorrow.
And I'll check with Mike Steinlich to see who could be,
Right.
if either of us could be.
Okay, thank you.
Housing and Finance Committee. We had a very interesting committee meeting, very enlightening committee meeting. I was very excited. But there were 2 transfers proposed to cover the cost overruns to our current year. One of them is due to energy costs, and the other one is due to a problem at the Hedionda pump station. And both questions I was asked by our general manager to question and find out about. And you'll be very happy to understand that they had graphs that would have made our finance guy really happy, and they're gonna be showing them at the full meeting.
Okay.
But they did show them to us, the graphs of who's paying how much, so that we're paying our fair share. But our prices keeps going down. We're the only one that keeps going down in price.
Yeah.
So a lot of good reasons for it, and I don't think in the past 4 or 5 years they were doing what we're doing now. So congratulations to our finance and our general manager for getting that done. So they showed the charts to the committee, and actually Keith asked a couple of good questions there regarding that, and we got the numbers, and it'll be in the board packet. So when you get the board packet, your answers will be there, probably with the graphs. But it's very good, and they're very impressed with you, so I need to tell you that. The other question, the other thing that came up was, as you know, they had to do some work on some of the wells that haven't been even seen in 50 years. And they had to do some parallel piping, 2 pipes to up and above and around while they did this work. But when they tore into it, they found one of the walls that's about 2 feet thick, maybe a little thicker, and about 4, the whole wall has to be replaced. Now that wasn't guessed during the guesstimation because they weren't able to see it. So when they got in there, a lot of the rebar they're able to fix and the walls they correct. We're actually there on top of the pit watching them. They're relining this 500-foot pipe. It's a 72-inch pipe. So as much as I enjoyed watching the ones we did here on water, 8-inch, 72-inch is just massive on flatbeds. I mean, just 40-foot flatbed just rolled up, and like 20 guys piling on this. They hadn't actually started feeding it when I was there on Tuesday, but they said by midnight, and I left at about 11 o'clock, by midnight it would all be done, and they'd be putting in the water and then heating the water. And what they are doing though is they're putting in some, I want to call it windows, they have a different name for it, but they're going to be able to check visibly to see how it's going as far as the wall that they're having to complete. So, because you can never see it before. I've been there 50 years, and they really feel they're very lucky they went in when they did, because they might have lost the wall. And there is no redundant system there. So they're very happy with the way everything's going. This adding the wall added about 5 days to their time, and probably about $500,000, maybe a little more. Exciting to see, and the thing, and I wish I had my camera with me, I wish Mike was with me, Mr. Cameraman, because there was 5 guys, and there was one guy on top of the truck, and they're all wearing the harnesses, the height harnesses, and I'm looking, I'm like 10 feet off the ground, why are they wearing harnesses? Well, the hole of the road was 40 foot deep. I went, oh, I couldn't see that. And there was one guy there, and he was pointing and shouting and going back and forth, and I said, you see that guy? I go, yeah. He started with the company 44 years ago. 74 years old.
Oh, my goodness.
And he was up there pointing and directing all these young guys, and I'm like, wow, I couldn't move that quick. And so just awesome to see, and they expect it to be done by midnight that night with getting it all in place. And then 14 days later, 5 days for the wall to cure, it would be in operation. So hopefully you guys will get to see that, or you'll get to see that. But it was interesting to take the tour after. Not everybody stayed for the tour, just myself and Carlsbad, Keith, and a very interesting tour. Although I've seen the tour before, I didn't know how much they were actually doing with the above ground pipes, which are tremendous. And they must have had 12 huge generators, and they said 6 of them were backup because it has to keep going.
Full redundancy.
So very interesting meeting. I enjoyed it, so thank you. That's my report. Unless anybody has any questions on it, that answers that. All right, we're going to move on to standing committees. Director Snow, anything from Finance?
Finance meets on Monday at 4 o'clock.
Okay. Capital Improvement, whatever your committee's called.
It sounds like that. We had a preview of our groundwater study, and the full presentation will be to the board when?
I don't remember the exact timing.
Towards the end of July, first meeting in August.
Very good. I think you're going to be present.
July, August? Yeah, we haven't heard anything about that.
No, we're not going to tell you.
Well, obviously. And there were 2 other things we haven't heard anything about in a long time, so I'd like to agendize it, or have the committee report on it. Solar, where are we at? That's been a long time now.
Sun's out.
We heard an update at that same.
Yeah, they got an update at the same committee meeting.
Yeah,
We didn't get that update from this meeting, though.
not yet.
They're supposed to update us. The committee needs to update us. That's the idea.
Try to keep you in the dark as much as possible, President.
No, that was the old management company. We got a new sheriff in town.
The original survey was done. There's an RFP out presently, if I remember.
Just an RFP out? This is a year and a half later?
Well, so we have a consultant on board that's helping us on the solar project, but they're putting out a request for proposals to get the provider, the person that's actually going to build the system.
Yeah.
So they're going to go through that competitive process to select the right.
That's what I meant.
I don't know if there's a technical term for them, but maybe James can help out. These are the companies that are going to build it and that we'll enter into a power purchase agreement with.
My question is, maybe I've just been in the dark. What are they going to build? And where? What's being done?
So the original proposal hasn't changed. So you're looking at a 2 megawatt system doing the REDSBET, which is the combination of a bunch of meter systems that are offsite or remote at Twin Oaks on top of the 2 large reservoirs, and a NEM system, a net metering system that's direct offset for the energy use at Lift Station 1. Those are still the same 2 projects. The only project that dropped off was a floating solar at Mar Reservoir because of the complexity of that and the fact that Mar Reservoir goes down to almost nothing in the summertime. So it would be basically you'd have to build stilts. And then the last meeting, and I don't recall the board meeting we gave, is we came to the board and let them know that we had to do CEQA environmental on the project. We hired BRG. BRG has been underway, and we gave a timing and an update. Robert Scholl, manager, gave a timing and an update of when that would be. We, at the committee meeting, we reinforced that's still on schedule. I don't recall the schedule exactly, but I believe we're going to be paralleling the efforts. So in other words, we're going to be sending out to try and get the providers for the PPA. while finishing up the CEQA document, bringing that CEQA document to the board at one meeting, and shortly after bringing recommendations to the board whether we want to off-ramp or move forward with a power purchase agreement.
So at the next meeting, can we have at least a schedule?
Sure, yeah, schedule is
Some kind
actually.
of timeframe.
Yeah, schedule was actually provided at the committee meeting. I'll double check the minutes, but we could also bring it back and just do a update through the GM report.
Yeah, and that's probably about as much as we can talk about now. We're not, this isn't agendized.
No, yeah, I don't want to hear it now. I just want to hear it in the future, that's all.
We'll put it on a future
What we're doing
agenda.
with both of them.
Yeah, we'll put it on the
Ground,
future.
what we're doing with it. Are we within budget on the solar? What's the money looking like? And I hate to bring up the last one, septage. What are we doing with septage? Are we transporting it?
We haven't really started that yet. The board approved money towards it, but we have to go through the process of getting a consultant on board, and that has not started yet.
We haven't spent any money yet.
You only got 30K.
Plenty of money. We're gonna be saving money.
Thank you. So that's director's report. Aqua Region 10 program, they're having a program coming up. When is that?
It's July 30th. Sorry.
July 30th?
Go for it. It's July 30th, it's going to be focused on the disadvantaged communities, mostly, as well as a legislative forum afterwards. I have a list of speakers, but at this point, they haven't clarified who they are, so I can't even tell you that.
Okay.
And we'll be up in Mission Viejo again. Not the same place, but
It's going to be at the Arroyo Trabuco Golf Club from 9 to 2 on July 30th.
on July 30th.
Tee off at 2:20? Okay. Director's comments, future agenda items? Anyone? No comments? Time being 6:52. Adjourned.